Right. This is it. We are live for this week's Sales Confidence Masterclass session. I'm super excited about this. I'm just going to let everybody join the chat. So when you arrive, just shout out where you're dialing in from today. And what's been the highlight of your day so far? I can see Chris, Tamir. Tell me what your highlight has been so far. Might have been just getting out of bed. Good for you. Some days that is the highlight, just getting up and getting moving. Some of you might have closed the deal. Some of you might have just hired someone. Don't be shy. I see Rudy, Carly. I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes before we kick off this session. And I introduce David. And just to give you a heads up, this guy likes interactivity. I mean, in fact, he likes cold calling so much, he's got his mobile number on his LinkedIn profile. So you can give him a call after this and let him know how fantastic his session was. All right, Carly's in. Yeah, and just as a heads up, David, there is a slight delay. I think it's like maybe even 10 seconds between our delivery here and then actually seeing it. Oh, she's got a GIF. Can you see? I love that. I didn't know they have GIFs in here. Oh, yes. I'm going in with the kitten GIF.
What's been your highlight, James?
Oh, that's a good question. So one of my really important social media managers and virtual assistants, who practically works for me 90% of the time, she's been ill for the last 2 days, and she's back in today. And it was like I sent her like 10 tasks back to back, and it was been such a relief. So that's been my highlight. How about yours?
I have to say I have become a bit of a gym junkie. I think me and Rudy same. I've become a bit of a gym junkie this year, and I've been doing 5:45 starts to get into the city to the gym. And last night basically today's my rest day. So I went to bed at 9 o'clock last night, and I got up at 8 o'clock this morning. It was so 11 hours sleep on a work night. I think is pretty spectacular, and I'm refreshed and ready to go.
Amazing. Okay, let's kick off. Luma, welcome. Chris has just joined. Matt's just joined. Sonia's in the house. So we've got 10 or 12 people in right now, which is exciting. So I just want to introduce this week's masterclass expert. His name's David Bentham. He is essentially the director of SDR global function at Cognism. Cognism is a UK-founded sales intelligence platform, one of the most exciting businesses to be born out of the UK in software in the last 5 to 10 years. And literally, David has taken that business from 5 to 75 reps, and Cognism's grown from $2 million to over 45, I think it is now. You hit the 45 mark?
45 back to finish the year last year. And
it's incredible. It's incredible. So he's going to be talking about cold calling, which more of us need to be doing. So there's some tactical stuff. For those of you that are coaching, mentoring people, you can use some of this content to help you with that. And then those of you building out functions, there's going to be some Q&A around how you build out effective outbound sales teams. Do fire the questions in because David's keen for interaction. But I'll hand over the mic and then I'll pop back on for when the Q&A starts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James. And thank you for having me, and really appreciate everybody jumping on with us today. James initially asked me to speak about cold calling, but I think considering the audience, I want to, as he just mentioned, I want to do a bunch of stuff or I want to do some stuff on cold calling, but I'm also happy to take any questions about kind of the scaling process for SDR teams or outbound sales teams in general, because as he mentioned, I do have a little bit of experience there. I've got some slides. Unfortunately, because of the technology, I'm not going to be able to see your questions as they come in. Because as soon as I share the slides, they go. However, sorry about this. However, James is going to help me out by talking me through your questions. So please fire them in, and James is going to jump in and shout them at me as they happen. So let me just share now. Everybody can see, yeah?
Yeah, we can see it. It's all
fantastic.
Good.
All right. So yeah, thanks for the warm introduction. Just to repeat, I suppose what James mentioned, I'm the Director of Sales Development at Cognism. We have 75 SDRs globally. We have 35 here in the UK, 15 out in the States, and another 15 out in Cologne. And we're looking at France as kind of the next objective and building that SDR function there as well. Our target market is SMB right through to enterprise. We're generating opportunities with, 100,000 person orgs as well as 10 person orgs right now. So it is the full range that I've experienced. And I joined the organization when we had a run rate of around 1 million ARR, just a bit less. And today we've just hit that 45 million mark. I've always been a big believer you need to start presentations with social proof. And so here are the very literal, here's the data from 2019 in terms of how much pipeline we're bringing in. This is actually only the UK figures, but this is how much the UK SDRs are bringing in month on month, and you can see some pretty strong growth there. The reason I've told you all this stuff is because essentially cold calling is the cornerstone for the success of my team. Today, 70% of all of our meetings are booked over a cold call. First and foremost, I would say 20 to 25% are booked over LinkedIn, and then 5% over email. So really, cold calling has been everything that we do. And what I'm going to go through now is the theory that we present to our SDR team when they first start as SDRs here. And like James said, if you're a leader and you want to copy any of this, then obviously feel free to, or if you want to see how we're presenting it to our team. And if you're an individual contributor, hopefully you can take some learnings from this yourself as well. So first things first, some ground rules for these sessions and stuff that people don't talk about on LinkedIn and everywhere else. In terms of cold calling and in terms of sales in general, the best sales conversations are always going to be human. And what that means is that, and as much as everybody online will tell you that there's like a perfect one-liner to say, or a perfect way of objection handling, that is just not true, and there is no silver bullet at all. The main thing is whenever you're generating your scripts or your way of working, is you just need to keep testing and testing and testing and testing. And you should be taking inspiration from what other people do and pulling that into your scripts, but you should never expect it to work for you in the same way that it might be working for other people. I often give an example of an opener that one of my Australian SDRs once was using, and that was, he'd open every call with, "Hey, this is a cold call. Feel free to hang up the phone if you want." And pretty much every time he said that in his Australian accent, everyone would laugh and then go, "No, don't worry about it. Like, I'm happy to give you some time." It was working so successfully that a lot of the other members of the team started incorporating that into their script, and it never worked for them. And actually, people were hanging up on the phone a lot of the time. So it's really important to understand that when we're cold calling, and everything that I go through today, really the cornerstone of a good cold call is that it's got to be a human conversation. And there's no right or wrong answer to everything. It's going to be it's all about the way that the prospect is feeling, the way that you're feeling, the way that you're delivering, the tone that you're delivering it in. And so there's no perfect silver bullet here. And you should just keep testing and testing and testing. But what we've developed here at Cognism is a framework for how we go about our cold call. So this is what our perfect world of cold calling looks like. And essentially what we're doing is we're splitting each cold call up into 5 different stages. The first stage of every cold call is going to be the introduction. That is me saying, "Hello, my name's Dave and I'm from Cognism. I need to humanize myself. I'm trying to contextualize the call. It would be really weird if I just called and then just suddenly started pitching immediately." So the obvious thing to do is the intro. The second stage is going to be what's commonly called the hook. And that is the thing that we're going to say that's going to get us into that conversation with our prospect and keep them on the phone. So usually, and what most sales gurus will tell you is to say something where you're presenting the value that you might bring to the prospect. And only that. Don't talk, you're not talking about kind of the products at this stage or anything else. You're just talking about the value that you're about to bring to them. After that, we go into what's called the discovery. Now, sometimes I get criticized for calling it the discovery, and that's because the discovery is often used as a term for when you're going into a demonstration of your platform, or you're going into a more formal meeting, and it's the way that most account executives will introduce those calls. And that is asking questions, finding out information about the prospect's processes and how they're going about their work, um, and doing all of this before you actually pitch your product. Now, with the discovery for them, I see it as important for when we're doing a cold call, and I think a lot of people are missing out on this. Every call that we make, as soon as we're in the conversation, we want to be asking as many questions as possible and really doubling down on trying to find a pain, challenge, or goal that the prospect has. But I'll get onto that in a little bit later. The next step is the personalized pitch, and I've called it personalized for a reason. So once we found out the information that we need to from a prospect, then it's going to be really, or the next step is making sure that we're pitching the elements of our product or service that's relevant for them based on the information that we've gathered. And then finally, once we've done all that, we're going to be closing. So again, sometimes I get criticized because people commonly think about closing as what you do to signing a contract or signing a contract with a prospect. But for me, the close in the world of cold calling is usually, or it is for Cognism, it's booking a meeting, it's asking someone to do a demonstration, but it's essentially the end of the call.
Have we lost David?
Ingram. We run them every 2 weeks, and we've actually got one going on tomorrow. It's a super interactive session where people are just asking us questions. And the most common questions is, what is your intro? And there's a bunch of different ways where, in terms of like how people suggest how to intro, what they say during the intro. But there's no, again, going back to my first slide, there's no right or wrong answer here. You've got to do whatever is comfortable for you, because that's the thing that's going to be human for you, and that's going to be the thing that resonates the most with the prospect and gets you into as many conversations as possible. So first thing to do and to really think about is just test a load of different intros, but make sure you pick the one that's human to you and works the most. The second piece is, the other day, and I don't want to call him out, but I'm about to call him out. The other day, I saw a video that Josh Braun put up on LinkedIn, and it talked about personalization, and it talked about him having some kind of foot disease that was or foot ailment that was very particular to him, and how a salesperson had reached out because they also have that same foot problem, and with advice on how to I suppose cure, or like how to help with that foot ailment that he had. And he was raving about it. He was saying it was such a fantastic piece of personalization. It really got him into the conversation. Now that was all well and good, but my first thought was, how the hell am I going to scale that? So first thing that we know is that personalization is always going to be better, and that includes on a cold call. If I can open up the call by immediately talking about something that's relevant to that prospect, that is fantastic. But you've got to find something, and in terms of training your reps, you've got to find something that's going to scale. And so the best way that I've found of scaling personalization is by taking up a bottom-up approach, whereby what we're doing is we're calling usually the end users of our product. So if you don't know, we're a contact data tool. So we actually work with outbound sales team all the time to give them contact mobiles, like mobile numbers, emails, etc. And what we do is we actually go to those end users, those outbound salespeople, and we say, hey, talk to us about your day-to-day processes. What's it like? Do you have a data tool that you're using already? They might mention one of our competitors. And then we're using that information to go up to the decision makers at the top, as the perfect way of opening up a cold call. Because if I'm going into a call and I'm saying, hey, I was actually talking to one of your team members, Stephen, the other day, and he mentioned the fact that actually, and I won't name a competitor, but he mentioned that the contact data provider that you're currently using is giving him a bounce rate of 30%. We think we can improve that. That's going to be a fantastic way of like always opening up a call and showing that we've done and making essentially our prospect, our decision maker in this context, understand that we've done our research, we understand about their processes, and we're there for a reason. I should have put it down. I thought I was about to put it down, I thought I was going to put it down. But essentially, what our prospects don't want to think or feel is that they're another name on your list, on your calling list. Now, they probably are, but we really, really don't want people to, we don't want our prospects to think that. So most scalable way to personalize from my experience is go to the bottom, speak to the end users, talk about their current processes, and then go to the decision makers and open up your calls that way. The next thing that I want to do, and this I suppose ties back to what I just mentioned, is tell a story about why you're there. I started off my sales life in door-to-door sales. I work for a company called HelloFresh, if you know them. They basically sell fruit and vegetables. And what I learned pretty quickly is if I knocked on someone's door and I just said, hey, just jumped straight into a pitch, it goes back to what I mentioned before, but they wouldn't feel special. They immediately hear that I'm a salesperson, and they shut the door on me pretty quickly. So what I started to do is develop a story that was giving them a reason why I was there. So, going back to what I just mentioned, it could be the fact that I'm there because I've spoken to your team, and they're really not happy with the contact data that they're currently being provided, and it's not allowing them to hit the targets that they need to hit. Back then, what I did is I used to talk about the fact that one of the neighbors was getting HelloFresh, and therefore, like the delivery truck was coming around anyway, so I may as well. So I thought I'd come around and offer you a potential discount, and that was my reason. Now, don't tell anybody, but that reason was a complete lie. Now, I don't recommend lying. However, it's a pretty good reason to make the prospect feel like I was there for a reason, and that's going to be really, really important, making our prospect feel special. And then the final thing that we need to do at the start of all calls.
David,
sorry, go.
Come in here because I'm in absolute stitches about this story. This is hilarious, great content. Thanks for sharing. And it resonates for me because I used to do door-to-door selling milk delivery services. Yeah. So rather than getting your milk delivered every week, which of course you do, from Tesco's, Asda, or any named store, I used to say, well, that farm that you drive by at the end of your road, that's where your milk comes from. So yeah, been in stitches. Hilarious story, mate. Thanks for sharing. This is absolute gold. Keep going.
No problem. Awesome. And then the final thing is mirroring. Now, mirroring is going to be incredibly important throughout a call. It goes back to what I mentioned in the first slide around humanization and it being a really human conversation that we're doing. But it's really important, especially at the start, to understand or to listen very carefully to the tone in which our prospect is speaking to us so that we can immediately mirror them. Often when you cold call someone, they're going to be very busy, and because we've interrupted them out of the blue. And so we need to mirror if they're sounding very hasty, we need to mirror that so that they recognize, and even if it's subconsciously recognized, they subconsciously recognize that we understand that they're in a rush, and we're going to account for that in this cold call. And so this is going on to some of the stuff that I really, really would always ask that my SDRs avoid is don't drop the phone as soon as they say they're busy. this is the most common objection that you get during that intro hook phase, is people saying, oh, I'm busy. Of course they're busy. We've cold called them out of nowhere. It's also the easiest way to get a salesperson off the phone is say you're busy, say you're going into a meeting. But from experience, 95% of the time, if they've picked up the phone in that moment, they're not busy. And so they will always, if you push through, it's very, very likely they'll always have 5-10 minutes, which is all I generally need. So if they say they're busy, we're pushing through. And I've not seen these bits because I didn't make it because marketing did. So we're going to move on. All right. Cool. Next part is the discovery and the personalized pitch. So the obvious one that hopefully everybody knows here is it's really, really important to ask open-ended questions. We don't want to be asking the yes, no, anything that where it's a yes or a no, and that can end the conversation pretty quickly. Nice open-ended questions. But what people don't think about is, and what kind of takes cold calls to the next level, is really starting to think about what information do we want, and then how do we direct the prospect through asking the right questions in a way that gives us that information. So let me give you an example. One of Cognism's benefits is the fact that so our Chrome, we'll take our Chrome extension, for example. So our Chrome extension works over LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It allows you to pull the contact data. You get a LinkedIn Sales Navigator list of 25 individuals. You can pull all 25 straight into CRM straight away. So if I'm calling someone and I open up the call with a nice open-ended question and say, hey, so how are you currently going about finding new prospects and prospecting? If they say LinkedIn as their first response, my brain is straight away going, okay, I'm thinking about the Chrome extension. I'm thinking about all the benefits of the Chrome extension. So what questions do I need to ask to then get them to say that ultimately LinkedIn is good for a lot of things, for identifying prospects, but it's not very good for actually getting the phone numbers and emails. And so what I'll do is I'll ask questions such as, okay, fantastic. So talk me through it. You go on LinkedIn. Are you LinkedIn Sales Navigator users, so that I can split that out? Yes, no, okay. And so once you have a prospect that you've identified on LinkedIn, how do you then get their emails or phone numbers, et cetera, et cetera? And thinking about that path is going to be super important. And again, if you're a leader here and you're training your reps on cold calling, we do session after session with our teams on these lines of questioning. So what questions can we ask to get our prospect to mention a pain, challenge, or goal that we can that we can address? And then once that's identified and we've got all the information that we need, then we need to double down on that exact point. So again, for example, Cognism is a global data tool. We have 400 million profiles, so we can service pretty much anybody worldwide. But if someone says to us that their issue is, that they're using one of our competitors that maybe is good in the US, but not so good in Ireland, if they say they're not so good in Ireland, I'm going to immediately double down and say, okay, fantastic. Well, we are the number one choice for Irish contact data. And I'm not going to go any further than that. I'm not going to start talking about us being global. I'm not going to talk about, like things like our integrations or any of the other elements of the product. They've told me a pain challenge or a goal, one single pain challenge or goal. We can fix that pain challenge or goal. So I'm going to explain how we do that, and then I'm not going to go any further than that. All right. And finally, the final step is the close. So there's a couple of things here that's really important. I'm actually going to start from the bottom, or I'm going to explain this graph that we've created that we kind of use to help explain to new starters kind of when to close. So really, our demonstration, roughly, or what we say to the prospects on the cold call, is it's going to take 15 minutes, right? And so when we're saying, would you like a 15-minute demonstration of the product, that is going to be the cost to them, is 15 minutes of their time. So all we need to do during the cold call is explain the benefits enough that the cost of 15 minutes of their time is worth paying for the potential of the value that our service can bring in terms of coming and seeing a demo, which is the graph that you can see on the right. That's the pure theory. Now, if everybody here thinks about the amount of times that you've wasted 15 minutes of your life, I mean, I've not downloaded the app because I think it's going to be a disaster. But James, I've seen you on it a million times. But TikTok, from what I've heard, if you jump on that for even a second, as soon as you click on that TikTok app, you're probably losing 30 minutes of your life, right? That's what I've heard. Anyway, so 15 minutes is not a lot of time. And so we only need to explain benefits enough that we surpass that mark. And one mistake that lots of cold callers make is that they just try and throw, and it kind of goes back to what I just mentioned before, but they try and throw every element of the product and service at their prospect, and ultimately they start talking themselves out of the demo or out of the meeting because the pro side, and you've started to maybe you've mentioned an element of the product that they're not actually interested in at all. You've got the thing that they are interested in, and you kept talking, now you're talking about something that they're not interested in. So what I always say, and the advice that I always give to anybody cold calling, is always close too early as opposed to too late, right? The mistake is people usually closing too late because, I mean, it depends on what you like, how long your meeting is and what you're trying to do. But really, people are willing to give time, or should be willing to give time up pretty easily if the value of the service is there. And one technique that we're absolutely massive on here is assuming the sale. So the way that we're closing is we will never ask, do you want a demonstration of the product, right? No matter how much they like the product, we're never going to ask, do you want a demonstration of the product? Instead, what we do is we phrase our close in a way that assumes that they want a demonstration of the product. So the way that we teach it here is we say, okay, so next steps for us is we want to run a 15-minute screen share of the platform and run some personalized searches for you. And then the next thing that I ask the SDRs to say is, so do you have your calendar in front of you, right? And that's this assumption. And what that's going to do is anybody that has seen a bunch of value, loves it, is 100% in, they're always going to say to us, yep, sure, no problem at all. I'll take a demo. I have my calendar in front of me. The people that aren't interested are still going to tell you they're not interested. They're going to go, no, don't have my calendar in front of me, not interested. But the people that are on the fence and they're kind of like, this sounds okay, they're so much more likely to say yes in that scenario just by the way that we phrase the close. Assuming the sale is going to suggest confidence and create this impulse buy scenario where, hopefully they're so much more likely to say yes. And then once we've got the calendar invite in and everything else is running, once they've said yes, they're obviously so much more likely to turn up from there. So that's the way that we're training our SDRs today to close. And then the final thing that I mentioned, and I see it a lot with, again, new starters, is that often they'll ask that question. They'll try and close. They'll say, "Hey, can I get 15 minutes of your time?" The prospect will say no, and then they'll just give up there. They'll just be like, "Okay, no problem. Well, I'll see you later." And what we need to be training our sellers to do in this scenario is to think about, okay, what's the next best thing I can get out of it? Is it a referral? Is it more information? Is it being introduced to a DM? Like, what can I be doing here to still maximize the call, whatever it is? Say, the final thing, the final thing in terms of that's not put in within the structure, but always comes up, is the fact that you're going to get these objections, right? You're going to get pushbacks every time you go for a cold call. So a couple of key tips here. First things first is the biggest mistake, again, that I see from cold callers is that when they get an objection, they allow their own emotions to react first. So say someone says, sounds really expensive, you hear in their tone that they'll go, yeah, I suppose, right? And I don't know whether because I can't see myself, but you know, even their body language, you'll see it in the office if you're with them or whatever. You see their body language come in because they're like, oh, it's another person saying something, like giving me a pushback. And so what we're training here is that every time they get an objection, no matter what it is, they have to respond with some kind of positive comment. I used to train, again, when my door-to-door days, I used to work with loads of backpackers. So often we were training people with ropey English, let's call it that, because they were from, you know, Germany, Sweden, Scandinavia, France, etc. And so we would just train that every single time you get an objection, just say the word perfect, right? This is too expensive. This sounds a bit expensive. Perfect. Yeah, because what we're doing is we're telling our prospect that we have a solution, and we're building a foundation for our objection handle that's going to come later, that is going to allow them to that's going to make us so much more believable when we actually give the solution and when we give that objection handle. The second piece of advice I give on objection handling is that there are two types of objections. One is, or the way that I bucket them is into emotional objections and product objections. So emotional objections are any objections that basically come because we've cold called them, we're a salesperson, they don't like salespeople, you know, they just want to rush us off the phone, but they haven't actually heard anything about the product. They've got no other reason to object. They're just doing it because they want us off the phone. And these often come at the start of calls. And then product objections is objections that are specific to the product. So for example, this sounds expensive. It could be that, you know, for Cognism, GDPR comes up a lot, and so as like an objection. So that's a very specific product objection. Now, with product objections, in terms of how to handle them, you've got to think about product objections as just questions, right? Questions about your product, and you just need to have really good product knowledge so you can understand how to handle them. Emotional objections, really the best way of handling emotional objections is by preventing them happening in the first place. So, like I mentioned, the most common emotional objection is, you know, someone saying right at the start of the call, "Oh, I'm busy right now." Now, the reason they've said, "Oh, I'm busy right now," is because they've heard that you're a cold caller, and they want to get you off the phone as quickly as possible. So, if we can humanize ourselves from moment one, maybe we could, you know, I spoke about Brad, this Australian guy earlier, who would make everybody laugh by saying, "Hey, this is a cold call." As soon as we got them to laugh, their emotions change, and so so really everything comes down to the way that we're introducing ourselves, avoiding being too salesy, humanizing ourselves, and avoiding it in that way. But if you do still get the emotional objections, then what you want to do is you want to try and make them, you kind of want to turn them into product objections, or you know, like rational objections. So for every emotional objection that you ever get, what you want to do is you want to basically ask them why. Now, you don't want to just say why, but for example, going back to the "I'm busy" response, the way that I have always handled it is, "Oh, that's no problem at all. Just so that we're saving both of our time, can you just like give me and just for my notes, is there any reason why you might not be able to take the call right now?" And then they've got to give me a reason, and then hopefully we can build from there and try and make it a more rational response moving forward. And then the final thing, and hopefully everybody knows this, right? But the major training that we do on objection handling is we use the structure feel, felt, found, move on. There is so much content on this online, so I'm not going to bore everybody forever, but feel free to Google it. I'll give you the 1 second or the 10-second version of feel, felt, found. But essentially, as soon as you get an objection, the first thing you want to do is you want to empathize with your prospect. It's so important that you don't ignore them. Then they're just going to get annoyed. But yeah, you basically want to say, "I understand how you feel." Then you move on to the felt element. So that's basically saying that the objection they have is not exclusive to them. And so, yeah, and the reason you're saying this is you're basically saying it so that way they understand that when you deliver the solution, which is going to be the found bit, this is a solution that you've offered to other people and they've already agreed with. So it's, again, going back to building a foundation for when you offer the solution. So I understand how you feel. I've actually spoken to lots of sales, heads of sales, and they felt exactly the same way. And then the found is, like I mentioned, the solution. And what they found was that actually when they jumped onto a demonstration of our product and they saw all of the different elements that, and then we talked through our pricing structure, that we had tailored pricing for each and every person that we speak to, and we can work on bespoke packages that are suitable for you. And final bit of this is the move on, right? That's the stuff that you might not see online, but it's something that I really double down on, is when you get these objections, you've got to show your prospect that you're really confident, and you've got to exude confidence when you're presenting your solution. And a really, really great way of doing that is once you give them that solution, you have to ask another question immediately that moves them on from the conversation. Don't wait to get the agreement, because don't you worry, they will tell you if they disagree. But what you're looking for is another question that keeps the conversation moving. So it could be anything. Think, this will be something that's relevant for your product, but for us, it might be something like, okay, so, how many salespeople do you have in your team? Are you using how are you using any, what does your tech stack look like, etc., etc. Anything that gives you more information and moves on the conversation. And then right there, my marketing team's plugged our objection response generator tool, which you can check out and can help some of your team as well. So my final, just to summarize everything that I mentioned and kind of summarize the key bits. Ultimately, there is no perfect script. There's no silver bullet for any cold call. It's so important that we're humans and we're creating a genuine human conversation. And really, and I'm a really big believer of this, cold calling is a numbers game. And no matter what, every time we make a call, we are winning. And the reason for that is because, some of the time we're going to get that positive outcome that we want. We're going to get the meeting, we're going to get the referral, we're going to get the information that we need, whatever it might be, but it's going to finish really positively. But if it doesn't, then it gives us a moment to be able to analyze the conversation, see where it's broken down in the first place, and really learn to get better and better from that. When I first started, again, this is my door-to-door days, but I used it a lot when I first became an SDR and I was cold calling as well. I used to work out my ratio. So I used to say, okay, for every 20 doors that I knock, I'm going to get one sale. And then I look to always just try and drop that and drop that and drop that. And what that allowed me to do is, number one, keep myself going motivation wise, because I was saying, because if I knew I had a 20-to-1 ratio, then I knew that if I'd got to door 21 and there was, I still hadn't got a sale, I was more and more likely to get it on the next one, the next one, the next one. But also it really focused me up on not doubling down on the wins, but actually looking at all the no's and seeing how I could change that outcome. Something that I say to my team all the time is it literally takes one call to change your life. So let's just remember that. That was my cold calling advice. Do we have any questions, James?
Absolutely, Ace. I'm going to start drawing in the questions. I've got some questions. This is amazing. Everybody, can you start asking questions in the chat, please? Start firing them, and then I will relay them to David. I'm curious, have you had to adapt the model over the years in terms of creating the 15-minute demo? And is it only really 15 minutes, or is it longer?
So it's not 50 minutes, it's 30 minutes.
Okay.
But we could do it in 15. So it's a little white lie, I'll be honest. But it's about creating that. If you think about it from a theoretical standpoint, the prospect's way more likely to commit if I say 15 minutes. And the truth is we've practiced it a million times, and nobody ever complains when we throw them a 30-minute calendar invite into their calendar. So it's tomato in that sense. But the key takeaway would really be that in your close, you're trying to create the smallest commitment possible and the smallest cost to our prospect when thinking about it.
Amazing. I know there's quite a few of you that are SDR leaders and outbound leaders, so asking questions around frameworks is good. The questions are starting to come in, but I've got a couple, so I want to ask mine first. I love the concept of every time we make a call, we're winning, because you're marketing your business, you're marketing your brand, and even though you're getting a no, you're getting the word out there. And I was just wondering, knowing all the data that you must have of recording calls, what point in the call time is it best to ask for that meeting? When you showed that curve, is it like 2 minutes in? Is it 5 minutes in? Is there an answer?
Yeah, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer there, right? I think another thing that we train with the team is buying signals, and so like how to listen to a prospect and notice the moments that they're like interested. And again, I'll go back to it. When I'm training my team, I find that the biggest mistake is that they're waiting for too many buying signals. They're basically waiting for the prospects to ask for the demo. I always say that as soon as they hear like one thing that indicates that they're interested, then to double down on it. So, for example, if someone says, "Okay, what's the price?" Basically, if someone asks one question to me on a call, I'm immediately closing. Like, I'll answer their question, I'm immediately closing. Because if they're asking a question that's product related, then I know that I've got their cogs turning. And going back to it, because our demonstration is 30 minutes of time, then it's really not a massive commitment to ask them, to ask them from that point.
Love that. So questions now coming in from Sonia, who is an SDR coach and also a sales confidence brand ambassador. What advice would you give to SDRs when it comes to dealing with all the rejection that they have to face with?
Yeah, I mean, I loved rejection, to be honest. I thrived off it personally. So I always found this on a personal basis, I suppose I found rejection so easy that all I ever tried to do with the team is really kind of make it so rejection is just part and parcel, and train them that as soon as possible. One of the exercises that we do with new starters is we get the managers, their line managers, to sit with them the first time they're making their dials. And as soon as they get a rejection, it's like, okay, tell me what happened there. And then I actually ask my managers to then, if they, as soon as the salesperson starts to get emotional about it or like worry about it too much, I get them to literally go, okay, cool, make another call. And it sounds, personally, I don't know how people feel about that, but personally, I think it's what the message that I'm trying to send my new team members is that it really just doesn't matter. Like, and we have like a million other people to call, and it's, one, like, let's reflect on it for a moment. Think about the things that we could improve, but then we've just got to move on. And I do that in a very literal way by getting my managers to sit by them and kind of like, I suppose, manage them through that process in that way.
I love that. Matt Cope and Carly Pledge, everyone's agreeing with you. Spot on, they're saying. Carly's asking, so she stepped up into a global role, very similar. I think you two should be connecting after this. She's asking how best to manage your time split between US and UK teams.
Yeah. Great question, Carly. Carly, we should sync on this, as James said. I know that we've had a sync before, so we're definitely. I'm more than happy to help out. So I try. I mean, it's difficult because it all goes down to prioritization, right? Like, sometimes there are US issues that pop up, and maybe they're not performing, and sometimes there's UK issues that pop up more, and that maybe like they need more help. So there's no again right or wrong answer here. I have 2 managers out in the US, and I have 6 managers here in Europe. I just try and split my time equally between those 6, is roughly speaking. So that means I'm spending, I suppose overall, I'm trying to do the math here, but it's roughly, I'm spending about 60% of my time with UK managers, 20% of my time with US, and 20% of my time with DAC. However, again, like, right now I've recently inherited the German team, and I'm seeing that there's like massive issues, and so like I'm spending a bunch more time. I was there all last week to fix that problem. So no right or wrong answer. I'd say the biggest thing about managing a global team is understanding the local cultural nuance, and that's what becomes really difficult. And so, Carly, I don't know your situation or whether you've got managers there, but what I try and do is I try and empower the local managers to be the regional experts. I keep repeating to them over and over again, you're the regional experts, and you tell me like how best to cold call in your region. Because, I've had arguments, debates with US individuals all the time about how I really want to dive into loads of questions on cold calls, but I think when it comes to US cold calling, it is a different ball game. And actually, try and ask questions if you can, but really, you need to get to the point pretty quickly as well. So,
love that. Love that.
Yeah.
Great response. Matt's asking, what's been the biggest challenges or headaches that have come along building such a big SDR function?
Yeah, great question. Biggest headaches is I suppose hiring is probably the biggest one. It's scaling hiring. Like we've tried to bring our hiring, or we have brought our hiring process internal. It's getting those people built up. I wish we brought our hiring process internal earlier, to be honest with you. I think as well it's how to create, actually this is probably the most important thing if you're looking to scale team. It's about creating a structure and progression plans that are going to scale. So our progression plan when I first started was, we had like SDRs and senior SDRs, and that was it. And then as the team gets bigger, maybe like the rate at which we could progress people into closing roles slows down. So we need to like add, so now we've added a third layer. And then in terms of the management, I have like pure managers. So my managers don't hold a quota, an individual quota. They're just there to coach. And, before we had team leads. So it's really thinking about, I suppose for all things, it's really thinking about, does this scale? Like, okay, maybe it works for a 10-person team, but will it work for a 75-person team? And if the answer is yes, and if it works for both, then you're in a fantastic position.
Great. Just as an observation, I was just sitting here thinking, everybody, I know some of you have started summarizing these masterclass sessions and then sharing a post on LinkedIn. I obviously encourage that because that's content for you. It's good for Sales Confidence Membership, and it's good for Cognism and David. So let's share the love after this. So Tamir's got a question around mantras or rituals to get the team pumped for a cold calling session.
That is a great, okay, to me, I love this question. And a lot of, I always refer back to my door-to-door days because that's where I learned my trade, really. And I think it was it's a much more, for me, it was a much more extreme version of what we do now. And I used to have a song called Busy Earning by Jungle. And before, I had this routine every day of like we'd sit having lunch, and then I would put this song on, and then that was the start of our day, and I'd just go through and I'd scream at them, and then we'd be driving around it was called Turf back then. I'd be no matter where we were, I'd be telling them why it's going to be the greatest day of their lives and stuff like that. And what I learned from that, going into a kind of more like the setting that we're in today, is how important selling the day is every single day to my team. So they'll all be able to recite this off by heart because I do the same thing every single week. But I always explain to them why Monday is the best day of the week. Then on Tuesday, I explain why Tuesday is the best day of the week. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I have a team stand up every morning. And actually, I talked to this with my regional managers because I'm not doing it for the US and the German team because they're on different schedules. But the one thing that I had to train them is how to put on this show at the start of the day and sell the day every single day. And yeah, like I suppose it just comes with time and practice, but I think you learn pretty quickly that as soon as you're not in the mood, the team won't be in the mood. So you've just got to show the team every single day to start the day that you're in the mood and you're going to get after it. And so, yeah, I could to me, I'm happy to sing with you after in terms of how I sell them into every single day specifically, but that's the general principle that I've always used to build people into the day.
That's class. I can see why people are smashing the phones in your business. I want to get on the phone. On average within your teams, Sonia's asking what percentage of connects do you tend to have for every 100 dials?
Yeah.
And then how many meetings are you roughly aiming for them to book?
Great question. So our connect rate is roughly around 8 to 9%. It kind of can fluctuate based on seasonality, but it's mainly sticks around 8 to 9%. And then we are converting at around a 15% from all calls that we're making. But again, that depends on experience and things like that. Our enterprise team are closing significantly, and yeah, it also depends on what you class as a call in that respect. So, for example, our enterprise team, they do a lot of this bottom-up approach where they're gathering loads of information and then calling kind of the senior decision makers. And I would hope that they're closing mainly around they're probably closing on the phone at around a 45% mark because they've gathered so much information. It's the perfect person that they're calling and everything else. But maybe some more of our commercial reps that are just calling straight into the managers. That's more like a 15% rate, like I mentioned. So yeah, but those are roughly our numbers.
Cool, that's great. So we've gone through all the questions today. If there's any burning questions, please ping them. David, is there like a final parting thought where you're like, remember this or do that, or think
remember
about that?
This. Remember this. That's a really great question. I think so. I think most of it sounds like a lot of the audience members here are leaders, and perhaps if they're not, they're aspiring leaders. So I think probably my final thought would be that would be this kind of lead by example stuff that I was mentioning before. I think the energy that you bring to the team is exactly what the energy that they will give every single day. And so if you want, I know I buck a lot of the trends here, but I'm very traditional in the fact that I'm a 5 day a week. I've got my SDRs in the office 5 days a week. I commit the time to do that, like myself, and that's what I'm willing to do. But a lot of that is because then I can march around the office and just kind of like constantly just be the energy supply for the office. So yeah, maybe my final thing going into this the rest of this week and maybe this month is like just every single day just be the energy force that you bring, the energy that you expect your team to bring. Would be my message.
That's great, and you've boosted my energy after I had a big lunch, so thank you for that. It's been superb. Hold on the line because I want to just have a chat with you before we wrap up. Guys, can we get, and girls, can we get a round of applause in the chat, please? Just a thank you, a shout out. As I said, get some content up on LinkedIn. Let's talk about what we've learned today because some mega takeaways here. So the what's just why, because we've got to wait for the question, the applause to come through on the delay. Just one final question is, what is that journey from a new SDR to a senior SDR? How many months does that typically take?
Yeah, so we have like a 3 month. So we actually have 3 stages of our SDRs today. So we have we split our team into commercial and enterprise. So that's zero. So companies that are 0 to 500, or really it's like 50 to 500. We wouldn't outbound anything less than 50. So 50 to 500, and then 500 plus is our major split. And then we have commercial SDRs, enterprise SDRs, and then senior enterprise SDRs. And essentially, what we're trying to do is we think it takes our team members or our SDRs about a year and a half of being part of our SDR group to become the AEs and the AMs that we want them to become. To learn all the skills required and have the experience required and mold them in the way that we want to mold them. So we've essentially tried to manipulate it so it's about 6 to 9 months in commercial and then 6 to 9 months in enterprise to move to senior enterprise. Okay. So it probably gives us about, and I think those are pretty good timelines if you think about the groups that we're managing. I think if we're promoting them every 6 to 9 months, most of them are pretty comfortable with that, even if it's more of like a micro promotion than like a complete change of responsibility.
Amazing. All right, well, thank you very much. Everybody's giving you a round of applause. Great session, lots of gifts.
Appreciate it.
You're a star. Just hold the line.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody. Really appreciate you joining. Thank you, man.